Okay, so to shade the characters, you want to be in the viewport shading tab. This tab basically allows you to view the shaded character. The first thing you can do is press the new, and that creates a new material. And then in here, you can see the Principled BSDF shader. This is the shader that you're going to be using most of the time because it has pretty comprehensive control. You can change the color in the base color over here using the color wheel. And then it also has a lot of other controls, such as specular highlights, which it doesn't do anything at the moment. But if you go to the, this is the render tab. The specular highlights should determine how reflective or how much light is bouncing off of the object. And then there's roughness. Let's see if it's doing anything. Okay. Let's see if it does anything aside equals. Yeah, see, there we go. Um, if you pull the roughness slider to 1, you see that the shading is more matte. It's not as reflective, but if you pull it down all the way to 0, you can see the body is now much more reflective. Okay, and then if we go down, there are a lot of other controls. Some of these you're probably never gonna use. I have never used any of these. So anisotropic, sheen, clear coat, they might be applicable in some situations, but for the most part, you can just leave these on the default. But something that you can change is this transmission value. Let's see if it works here, but this pretty much determines how transparent this object is. Okay, Eevee might not be a good demonstration of this. But if I put this transmission value all the way to 1, you can see that it's a bit more clear. It turns it into like a more of a glass shader. And then this transmission roughness basically is the roughness of this glass. So if I pull that up, it's more more rough, I guess. And then transmission roughness, and then this IOR value pretty much does the same thing. IOR stands for index of reflection. It basically changes the way that the computer does the light calculations for this object. And then lastly, there is this emission value. Basically, you can make this thing glow. So if I change these emission color to say a dark blue, you can see that it's now giving off a little bit of a blue light around the neck. You can see the blue light bouncing off. And then the emission strength is just how much light is giving off. So if you want to make something glow, you can always change the emission color and the emission strength. But for this character, we can just start simple, I guess. There's the Principled BSDF. We can assign it a reg value, pull up the roughness a little bit. We don't need a lot of highlights on the cloth, so we can leave it at that. Next thing, uh, other than the Principled BSDF, there's also some other shaders that you might be interested in. One of them is the glossy BSDF. If you connect it, let's see, just makes it's pretty much like the transmission value on the Principled BSDF. It makes the object a lot more transparent, and you can give it a color if you want. So this pretty much does similar things to the transmission value on the Principled BSDF. For the sleeves, let's add back in a Principled BSDF. What color should we give it? About a light blue. Okay. So for now, all we've been doing is selecting the objects and then assigning them the entire object and individual color. What if we want to give the object, say, this part of the hand, a different color compared to the sleeve? So what we can do is go down to the material properties tab, the little ball on the side here. This is basically a simplified view of what you see on the shading tab here. To add another material to the same object, you can click the plus arrow here, and this will just assign add a different material to the same object. You can click new again, and then if we want to assign the hand a fleshy color, you can just change the base color to something like this. And then to assign only this part, the hand, a different color, we'll have to go to edit mode. And then, let's see, we have to select the faces that we want to assign to it be a different color. And then you have to click on the material you want that hand to be. So we want it to be a fleshy color. And then we have to click assign. And then when we get out of edit mode, you can see that the faces that we just selected are now a different color compared to the sleeve. And so basically this is the shading process for everything that you're going to make in Blender. You select the object, you create a new material. Let's assign the pants a black color. And then if you want to have the same object, have multiple different colors, you can create a add material, create a new material, change the color up a bit, go into edit mode, select the faces. Don't want this. And then click assign. Select the right material, click assign, and that'll be a different color. So let's say that you finished shading this entire character, and you want to render out the image. So what you can do is go back to select the right render engine, Eevee or Cycles. In this case, I'm gonna go back to Eevee. If you go back to the render properties tab, there is a lot of different options. Some of these are more applicable than others, like ambient occlusion. What that does is basically it calculates the light bounces in the small cracks and corners. That basically adds more shadow to the object. You can't really see its effects here because it's a relatively simple character. And then bloom, what that does, it'll be more apparent if I turn on emission over here. So bloom basically gives off this glowing effect to the object that's giving off light. You can't really see any difference if there's no light source in the scene. Depth of field is, I think most of you all know what depth of field is. It's basically the focus distance of the camera. The farther away the object is from the camera, the more blurry it will be. And then subsurface scattering. What this does, subsurface scattering pretty much simulates how light bounces internally within an object. So say if you hold your hand up to like a really bright light source, like a flashlight, you can see how your hand kind of turns red a little bit. And that's subsurface scattering. It's the light passing through your skin and then bouncing inside and then coming back out again, giving it more reddish color. Similarly, if you see a candle that's burning, how the wax kind of turns a little bit red, how the inside seems to glow a little bit, that's also another example of subsurface scattering. Similarly, if you see the leaves in the tree, how when the sun passes through the leaf seems to glow a little bit yellowish and green, that is also subsurface scattering. So basically in Eevee, You can change how many times the computer does these subsurface calculations. It's usually pretty resource intensive. And for most of the part, you're probably not gonna have any subsurface scattering. So I would just ignore that. Screen space reflections. Usually, you always want to leave this enabled because it just brings more reflections into Eevee render engine. It does what you think it does. It calculates more reflections. Motion blur. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. When you try to wave your hand in front of your eyes, you can see how your hand kind of goes a little bit blurry, and that's what motion blur is. Most of the video cameras on their cell phone or the big cameras they use in movies have motion blur, where if something moves really, really fast, it kind of just gets blurry. But in Blender, the default is off. So what that means is that each individual frame you render will not be blurred, even if something is moving across really, really quickly. Volumetrics, what this is, it's basically fog. So if you guys want to see something similar, if you want to see how volumetric works, you can delete the principled BSDF on any object and search up a principled volume, plug that into volume. And then you can see how Eevee kind of makes it look like it's a foggy appearance. You can change up the density a little bit. Since Eevee is doing all of the simulating how light would actually bounce, you kind of get these artifacts. So if you want to see how it actually looks, you can go to cycles to get better feel. See how if we change the density down, then kind of disappears. But if we bring the density back up, it turns into a solid piece of fog. So volumetrics pretty much determines how Eevee renders this fog. The tile size, a simple way to explain it is how detailed you want the fog to be. So 2 pixels is a lot more detailed compared to what it was on 8 pixels. Volumetric shadows is basically if you shine a light through the fog, whether or not the fog is gonna have any shadows or not. Let's see. Performance, just ignore that. That is probably not gonna matter. Shadows. Okay, this is something else that I should probably explain. The cube size here is similar to the tile size in the volumetrics tab. Is basically how detailed the shadows are. If you just change it to 4096 pixels, then each individual shadow bar the shadows are gonna appear more blocky. But if you bring it down to 64 pixels, it's gonna take longer to render, but the shadows are gonna look a lot nicer. And then anything else? Let's go to color management. Color management, basically, the only thing you need to know is the view transform. There's different looks for the same scene. So if you go to raw, this is what the computer sees. If you go to false color, this pretty much measures how bright something is. So yellow is a lot more bright than the blue part. It's pretty much you're pretty much going to be in standard or filmic the entire time. And then you can also change the contrast within color management. So this is the basic render settings for Eevee. So now that we have our character and we actually want to render it, what do we do? So you can go up to the toggle camera view. If you click it, the view will automatically change to the view your camera is seeing. You see this little rectangle here. This is all that your camera is going to render out when you press the render button. So if we want the camera to go back a little bit, you would have to press N to bring up this tab on the side. There's always going to be a view button on the side here. You can click lock camera to view. And what this does is that now if you move your viewpoint along the Blender UI, the camera will be locked onto what you're viewing. So say we want to render out the entire character, we can just click lock camera to view, and then position our viewpoint to the entire character. We can unlock it. And now when we press render, the camera will render out the entire character. Okay, output properties. So if you go to output properties, you can change the resolution of the output image here. If you're rendering an animation, you can specify the start frame and the end frame of the animation. And similarly, you can specify where each individual frames of the animation are outputted. You can save it to downloads for now. You guys can all play around with all the settings, see what it does. And especially for the shading part, there are a lot of other shaders that I just encourage all of you guys to play around with it, see what everything does, because it can get very interesting very quickly. But say that now we're done shading the character and we want to render out the image. You can go up here to the render tab, click render and render image. And there you go. Since this is Eevee, usually renders out pretty quickly. And you can just image save as to save this image. If we go to cycles here, you can see how it takes significantly longer to render because it has to calculate each individual ray multiple times. There we go. So yeah, that is the basics of how to shade and texture stuff in Blender. That was a lot of talking. Do you guys have any questions? Oh, can we import textures? Yes, absolutely. I can show you guys how to do that right now. Let's see. Share Blender real quick. Okay, say that you found a good texture online. Let me see if I can share my entire desktop real quick. Oh, share screen. There we go. My bad. Okay. So say that we found a good image texture. Let's do wood texture. You can put this image into downloads. And then if you open Blender, you still shade it the same way, click new. But other than for image textures, you're not going to change the base color. What you're going to do is Shift A to add an image texture. And then connect the color to the base color. This color is the output. And then this color is the input. And then what you can do is open image, select the image you downloaded, and there is the image texture on the cube. This is the basics of importing image textures. It gets a lot more complicated very quickly once you start getting into how to unwrap the cube and how to properly project the image textures onto it. What that means is that since this is a cube and the texture itself is a plane, you have to make the object into a plane. You have to make the cube into a plane so that image can be properly projected onto it. It's easy if your objects are simple like a cube, but if you have a really complicated object like this hat here, it can get pretty complicated when you try to start projecting that into a 2D plane. But for the most part, if you find a good image texture online, you can just connect the color into the base color, and it should work most of the time. Any other questions? Okay, cool. I'll be here to help out if any of you guys have questions. Feel free to reach out anytime you like.